Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Since I Was Young podcast about Heart of Midlothian Football Club. With myself, John McKellar. Now, it's a very different show this week. Obviously, last week you had an Alan solo episode. This week I'm doing it by myself. Both Alan and Ewan are indisposed, and Alan had asked me to go alone with this one because the boys want to keep up with the weekly schedule. They've been working really hard all season to bring you guys a weekly podcast, despite the fact both of them have been very busy at different periods. And especially with the momentum of last week's episode, Alan's solo episode last week has done numbers that I don't think either of them had ever imagined seeing for the show at the moment. Last week's episode is sitting at over 2,100 viewers on YouTube, which is just extraordinary, really. The on the subject of YouTube, actually, Alan and Ewan earlier in the year they had set up a goal of 500 subs on the channel. Thanks to the exceptional reception to last week's episode, that goal has been achieved. It's 504 at the present count as I'm doing this now. So mission accomplished to Alan and Ewan, and very well done to them. And massive thanks to anyone who has watched that show, and obviously previous episodes of the podcast as well. This was a labour of love at times, especially this year, and it's not been helped by the fact that the product on Depart from Hearts hasn't exactly been of a high standard all year. So it's been a labour of love for both Alan and Ewan, which is kind of why, myself, I've been a guest with both the guys on sort of, I think, the last two end of season review episodes. I've kind of ended up stepping in and doing more than that this year, more than I could ever have imagined doing. So it's always a real pleasure and a privilege to be invited on to join either Alan or both the guys. So I'm going to try and keep this as concise and to the point and straightforward and short as I can. It's not my strong suit though, and I've never done this by myself, so I'll be honest. I'm a little scared of this stage fright, I guess you would call it. So do go easy on me. I would like to urge anyone who hasn't already to subscribe to the show on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you consume it, and do follow us on the social media platforms. They are listed below on YouTube. So yeah, what we're here to talk about? We're here to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, among them, a game up in Dingwall, away from home to Ross County, where an embattled Hearts side who had gone 5 matches without a win took on Ross County, winning 3-1 under interim head coach Liam Fox, obviously following last week's dismissal of Neil Critchley. The Englishman was sacked immediately, pretty much after the loss to Dundee at Tynecastle last week. Hearts won 3-1 via goals from a Shankland brace, Lawrence Shankland scoring twice, and Alan Forrest, who scored late on to wrap up the win. Interestingly as well, Shankland set that goal up, so it was probably we'll get into it. Liam Fox, interim coach, he for the second time, he named a very interesting starting 11. Devlin was out with an illness. Jamie McCart was out injured with a thigh problem. Elton Kabangu and Sander Khartoum also both dropped out. This meant starts for Kenny Vargas and Alan Forrest, who both played on the wings. They were on the right and left wings respectively, and with them and between them playing in the number 9 role was, of course, our captain Lawrence Shankland. An interesting choice, a bold decision as well, to give a start to two guys who haven't really seen a lot of playing time. Vargas, earlier in the season, some of you may remember, is a guy that I became very frustrated with at times because I felt that he wasn't even touching the potential that he's shown in the past at Hearts. So a bold choice by Liam Fox. Went with a Kent Halkett centre back pair, which again, Halkett, not a guy who's played a lot of football in recent times. When he has, he's looked pretty assured. He's not a guy that we've known whether he's going to be reliable enough to start games, though. He's been very injury prone recently. However, he and Kent get the nod today. And as we'll talk about shortly, it's more or less paid off. And like I say, he went with a 4-3-3. Hearts played with some width, which, imagine that. Actual wingers as well. Very, very, very anti-Critchley set up from Fox, and we'll talk about that a wee bit more as we go. So some general match thoughts. It was a slog for about the first 25 minutes. Not a whole lot going on. Hearts did look quite positive. Yeah, they did a pretty decent job of trying to get the ball forward, play more direct, simple football. The kind of thing that probably most of us have been crying out for. And it looked like it was going to be a difficult game, a tough game, as it always is in Dingwall. As it pretty much always is when Hearts play away. We don't have the best away form in the last few years, do we? But Ronan Hale takes a nice pass from Kenna of County, who absolutely did Benny a peach to break forward in the 26th minute. Hale then slots a really nice driven low shot into Gordon's bottom left corner, which of course I think brought about a sense of the same old really. Looking like it was going to be your sort of typical 2024-25 Hearts positive start, getting the better of the chances, and then basically gifting a bad goal, and then sort of folding from there. It wasn't I'm being unfair to County there because Hale's shot was really well taken. Nothing really that Gordon could have done about it. And like I say, Kenny was pretty fantastic in the break to move forward. He just basically outmuscled Benny Beningame and did a fantastic job of it. At this point, predictably, the Hearts support became frustrated, as is completely understandable. There were chants heard of, "And Budge get to fuck," and sack the board. Now, I've discussed and Budge at length with Alan in recent days by way of text message, and I have to say, I think that the treatment of Anne Budge by many of our fans is absolutely absurd. For a start, she's the chief reason that we have a football club. Now, she is not a football-minded person. She leaves that sort of side of things to the footballing department, which has been failing in recent years. It's not something that's I think even arguable at this point. Like the particularly recruitment has been very poor in the last couple of years. We haven't been able to sustain the kind of form that we have made it our stated mission to seek on a regular basis. However, blaming Anne Budge for the woes of the footballing department is I think, absurd. It's quite ridiculous, to be honest. The key issue this season, and before I get into that, actually, let's go back to 2014, was it? It was 2014. Let's go back to 2014 when Ange came in and basically was the main reason for our club being saved from administration. She installed Craig Levine as director of football, which at the time was a great choice. Like, you can have whatever opinion you want of Craig Levine and his time at the club from there on. I dare say my view of Levine's time at the club between 2014 and 2020 it differs slightly from a lot of Hearts fans, and I'll go into why that is shortly. So he becomes director of football in summer of 2014. Robbie Nielsen is installed as head coach. Now, I get it. I was one of the people who really felt for Gary Locke when he lost his job. It was in a somewhat unceremonious fashion as well. I was never all that happy with how Gary Locke was replaced, but the fact was that he was replaced, and he was replaced by a guy who I have been an enormous fan of for a very long time in Robbie Neilson. I make no secret of the fact that I still miss Robbie Neilson as manager today. I think he was poorly treated by the Hearts support on the whole. When you look at his record in charge of Hearts, which we'll do now, 2014-15, he wins the championship at an absolute canter by, I think it was 21 points. Was the final gap, and that was a division that featured Hibernian and also Rangers, albeit Rangers that were working their way through the lower leagues, but they were still far and away the team with the highest budget and the best resources in that division, and we managed to beat them by a considerable distance. So Robbie Neilson comes in, wins the championship. First year back in the Premiership, we finished third. And that's a year removed from potentially being, in oblivion, but from potentially not having a club anymore. So 2015-16, we finished third. In December of 2016, we're in second place and could potentially give Celtic a challenge when Robbie Neilson's head is turned by the MK Dons job. Now, I don't think he should have gone when he did, but he did. His decision to leave the football club had absolutely nothing to do with Anne Budge. She wasn't responsible for that in the slightest. And the fact is that she had given Hearts every resource possible to be in the position that they were in at the time. It's that simple. Ian Cathro came in at that point. That didn't work. Now, if that experiment had worked out and we had ended up revolutionising, or I think that the recent language has been disrupt, isn't it? If we had disrupted Scottish football at that point in time, when Ian Cathro came in, we would be talking about a very different perspective that Hearts fans would have on the current board, and particularly Mrs. Budge. It's not how it worked out. It didn't go well. Craig Levein found himself in the position of manager from there. 2017-18 was a mediocre season. It wasn't a particularly good season, but it wasn't as bad as some seasons that we've had recently, most notably this one. Now, 2018-19, we were top of the league and unbeaten. And I think, was it mid or late October? And then an injury crisis that was just absurd, like an injury crisis that would have been considered like an impossibility virtually, ended up happening at Hearts, which then completely derailed their season. Now, Aunt Budge has never been part of the medical staff at Hearts. That's not her fault. That's just what happened. 2019-20 was, an outlier of a season in so many ways. Like we ended up relegated, despite the fact that we hadn't played the full season. We were not by any stretch mathematically doomed, and it was what it was. Anne Budge didn't control that either. She wasn't. She was not, to my knowledge, a virologist or an epidemiologist at any point in her career. So that's not something that she had any control over. So moving forward, 2020, 2021, Robbie Neilson comes back in. What do? We win the championship. Again, now it wasn't as comfortably as we had done so in 2014-15. Certainly it was not as comfortably as we should have under normal circumstances. But again, that period of time for everyone in every aspect of society was not a normal time, not normal circumstances at the time. So what can you do? 2021-22, our first year back, we finished third comfortably. Have we seen a pattern forming here? Like where has the major misstep by Anne Budge or the board happened so far at this point? Because the board and the footballing department, which by this point I think had become a problem, they're not the same thing. The recruitment centre is not the same as the board. They are not the people who are out scouting and the people who are signing players, the talent that are supposed to improve the football club and make us go places. Where's the major misstep by Anne Budge at this point? And we're in 2022 now, 2022-23. We looked like we were going to finish third again, and then the players down tools on Robbie Neilson. Now, there's been so much debate to be had about Robbie Neilson's last games of his second tenure, and he did get sacked. He got sacked at a time where I can kind of understand the board taking that decision, but at the same time, I do think that Robbie Neilson would have turned it around and gotten us out of that at the time. That's just my personal view, and again, I'm biased. I'm a big Robbie Neilson fan. But we finished fourth, so as of this point, no Robbie Neilson side has ever finished a season lower than third in the league. If he stayed on, probably at worst to finish fourth. Not a bad record. Anyway, so Stephen Neesmith comes in, finishes third in 2023-24, and then objectively, he botched recruitment last year. Joe Savage botched recruitment last year. Again, though, that's the footballing department. It's not the board. It's not Anne Budge. Anne Budge isn't popping a smoking jacket on and going to the wildest corners of the earth, watching young footballers. It's not what she does. She's a businesswoman. Pretty good one. Meanwhile, Hearts have been in the best financial position that they've been in a very long time, thanks to, in large part, the work of Anne Budge and the board. So, I guess and we're going to talk more about that later, obviously, with the recent news that's come in, and we're going to get back to the game shortly after this long tangent. I just wanted to make the point that, chatting Anne Budge get to fuck it, a woman who objectively is more responsible than anyone else for us having a football club after administration. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's quite disgraceful, to be fair. Honestly, I think if you're at games and you're chanting that woman who has devoted so much money, so much time and effort to trying to run this football club the best she can, despite not having a footballing background, and who has done, alongside the board, pretty damn good job of it on the whole. Now, I didn't mention the numerous Scottish Cup finals we've been in. We haven't managed to win any, which is frustrating. Particularly the 2022 final, which I was at, in which we lost 2-0 after extra time to a Rangers side who had played 2 hours of football 2 days before against Eintracht Frankfurt. We had 0 shots on target that day. Anne Budge wasn't the number 9 that day, to my recollection. It's not her fault that we couldn't hit a barn door with a fucking shotgun that day. So, yeah, that's my rant over. The key issue this season, as I've repeated ad nauseum on the podcast when I've been on with Alan, it's been piss poor performances and the abject failure of our players and inability to beat teams that are frankly beneath them. Time and time again, like Ross County, the board didn't concede 2 stoppage time goals to Ross County at Christmas and piss away what should have been an ironclad lead. Players on the park did, and that's been a running theme all year. We've been blaming some of us, I think, the wrong people. Yeah, that's my take. You can disagree, and of course, if you do, I invite you to comment underneath the episode and tell me why. Moving forward though with the game, Shankland, of all people, does equalise, and it's a well-earned reward, to be fair. At the 40-minute mark, he actually performed really fantastically in the first half. He looked more like himself. He seemed infinitely more comfortable deployed as an out-and-out striker, which, the headlines really write themselves in that regard. That is something that, while I was very much in favour of Critchley's appointment when he first came in, and based on early evidence, I became quite a fan of his. Like I've covered with Alan in the last few weeks, it quite sharply became obvious that he was failing to fix the things he was doing wrong. it seemed almost at times that he was very stubbornly sticking to things that were not working, i.e. the diamond in midfield. Playing Shankland in the 10, I think, was one of those things. He's our best striker when he's on form, and when he's on form is usually when he's deployed as a number 9. Your kind of typical Scottish hybrid of a target man and a poacher. But yeah, wonderful footwork from Shanklin to control a lovely set-up pass from Benny Beningame, who has made it a bit of a trade out of picking out lovely passes, and it was a proper striker's finish as well. Low drive past Jordan Amisa in the county goal to make it 1-1. And that's how we went into half time. Probably a fair result. Hearts, despite having probably the better of the play, and certainly the better chances, including an Alan Forrest sitter. He was basically clean through on goal, and he just claffed it over. Hearts were pretty profligate in the attack, which sadly has been quite characteristic of Hearts all season. County, though, looked lively in our box. When they had the few chances that they had, obviously they took the one in the 26th minute via Ronan Hale. They looked clinical when they went forward, and they were a threat to us pretty much any time they got near the 18-yarder, which wasn't that often. We did again have the vast majority of the chances in the first half. Anywho, yeah, probably a fair result at half time. County thought they had a penalty shout at one point for a handball by George Grant, but correctly not given. Fairly, it was a fairly not called a penalty. Although handball decisions are pretty arbitrary these days, it feels like. So it's one of them that if it was a different referee, John Beaton springs to mind, that might have been given against Hearts, because it doesn't. The handball rules are nonsensical and haven't made the game simpler. They've actually overcomplicated. Anyway, I don't want to get into that rant because I've already had 2 or 3 tangential rants, and we're only at half time in the county game. At 58 minutes, Shanklin scores a second. Signs of a poacher's killer instinct. We're returning by this point. He managed to sort of get a toe to a low cross by Kenny Vargas, which is great news. I feel like that's quite notable. For Shankland, he deserved it as well after his efforts. It was perhaps his best performance in the league all season. I think it's pretty obviously his best performance, to be fair, in the league all season, if not in all competitions. Following that, Hearts played with, I feel like, visibly increased confidence. They kicked their energy up a gear, which, what a novelty to see them actually score a goal and then look like they had the feeling of like, oh, that feels good, let's get some more. It's something that's been missing. That sort of killer instinct. Shankland leading by example at last it was very notable for the first hour. It must not be ignored though. This is far too little, way too late from him. This is what we should have been seeing from him all year. Although again, you can sort of mitigate that with the whole, he's been played in the 10 all season. What can you do? He should still be doing better. He has done better in the past, even when playing that role, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. It's not an excuse that I feel is a valid one, that, he's been played in the wrong way. He still has the quality to have done better. It has been an effort issue with him, as it has with so many of them. It's as simple as that, in my opinion. From there, the game sort of turned into a bit of a slugfest at times, though, in terms of physicality. There were a lot of petty fouls. Petty fouls? I can't speak. There were a lot of petty fouls at times from both sides. County were sort of getting frustrated and sort of coming apart a bit after the second goal. The referee, Don Robertson, to his credit though, did try to let the game flow as much as possible. And I must say, as much as I have been quick to criticise referees on the show this season, I felt Don Robertson had a solid game overall, honestly, which is nice to see. It's always refreshing. And I must say, I feel like I've said that about Don Robertson more than any other referee in recent times. I don't know if anyone else would agree, but I do feel that Don Robertson, among the bad bunch at the SFA, is one of the kind of better ones when it comes to referees at the SFA. It's just my view. It's just my observation from the games that I've witnessed, both in person and watching it on TV that he's featured at. So yeah, kind of becomes a bit of a slugfest, foul after foul after foul, lots of stoppages. Don Robertson did try to let it flow as much as possible. It was growing ever more. It was growing increasingly difficult to do so because it was Scottish football. What do we want? 82 minutes though, Alan Forrest scored a goal. It was Shankland again who was brilliant. He pounced on a county error, delivered the assist. So 2 goals and an assist from Shankland. Forrest collects a much needed goal. Nicely struck finish from, I don't know, about 8 yards, maybe 6, 8 yards. Sort of redeems his earlier misses. He had a couple of pretty clear chances to put the ball away and hadn't managed to. So it was good to see Alan Forrestinho, as Alan calls him, Alan Scrimger, that is, who is a big fan of Forrestinho. So he would have been delighted. To be fair, the overall play from both Forrest and Vargas over on the right was really good in general. On Saturday, I feel like, you know, that was one of the key talking points for me when I saw the side that Liam Fox had decided to go with from the start. Was the fact that he deployed Forrest and Vargas out wide, flanking Shankland through the middle. So the game finishes 3-1. Hearts, great result. Liam Fox, he understood the assignment. He made changes, the right changes, and some of them, like I've just mentioned there, like I just alluded to, some of them bold and surprising. They might even have been a wee bit risky when it came to the team selection, because if we had gone out there with that setup and had not won, and at one point it looked like it was going to be, again, it looked like it was going to be more of the same. It looked like County were going to potentially be another banana skin for us to slip on. People would have been absolutely fuming, and probably rightly so. However, that paid off, and it was a sorely needed result. The 4-3-3 system that Fox deployed the players in showcased, Liam's preferred direct approach, and it's an approach that I'm very fond of. Like, I believe that at our level, especially in Scotland, you don't need anything else, and I'll get into that a bit more as we move on to the next topic. But playing Vargas and Forrest out wide as proper wingers, it provided Shankland the support that he's been desperate for all year, and it allowed him to rediscover himself a bit. He played like Lawrence Shankland again for the first time in a long time. Hopefully those who were dropped, Cabangu most of all, will take the omission as a message and respond positively. We shall see how that unfolds in the next few weeks, the last few weeks of the season. Shankland, for me, man of the match by a mile, 2 goals and an assist. Who else could possibly have been named man of the match, which is great to see, because he's had an embattled season. I've been critical of Shankland. I've been very critical of Shankland at times. And so it was good to finally be able to kind of celebrate him again and cheer for our captain, for our talisman, our key attacking asset. Great to see. So yeah, 3-1 win up the road, well, down the road as it were. Great stuff. And so that was the game. I don't have anyone else here with me to bounce off, so I'm going to have to ask you, the Hearts supporters watching the show or listening on Spotify, to comment either below the YouTube video or under the Facebook post for this episode. What were your overall thoughts of the match on Saturday? I thought it was good old fashioned Scottish football, how it should be played finally, and it's something we've had a disturbing lack of at Hearts in recent times. Which takes us on to other news. The manager search. Several names obviously being mentioned. I'm not going to get into the different options that have been mentioned too much. For me, I feel like there's an obvious candidate here, an obvious choice, that being Derek McInnes. And I'll explain why. And I know that some in the support are going to bristle at that because it seems like there's a very divided fan base at Hearts in terms of what we actually need from a manager. And I'll say my piece, and you can agree or you can disagree. And of course, again, as is always the case, please do feel free to comment and tell me why I'm wrong, or tell me why you agree with me, or tell me, is there a dark horse candidate that no one has thought of, including Jamestown and the board, that you think would come into Hearts and do a job. I think it should be Derek McInnes if he is willing to make the move. Interestingly, I felt that Liam Fox set Hearts up more like a classic McInnes side at the weekend than what we've seen in recent times. The focus on higher energy wing play, try and get the ball forward. That's something that McInnes likes to try and do. More directness. The idea that we need to stop wasting possession by overcomplicating things and recycling possession non-stop, like we've done under successive managers, it feels like. Simplicity in approach at the Scottish Premiership level leads to better decision making, more efficient use of possession, and Hearts showed that at the weekend, particularly in the second half. The second half was fantastic. It's probably the best we've played all year. Because for all we've had halves in games, and we've played entire games where we've had more opportunities. We've played fancier football, but we have not been that clinical. We need to get back to basics. We need to get back to that approach, because that approach works. It works in football more generally, to varying degrees, but it works especially in Scotland with the style of play, and how football is played in Scotland. It's a long-winded and very probably poorly worded way of going about it, but yeah. The boys got physical enough to show County that they couldn't be bullied about the park as well, which is something that I've decried at Hearts all season. The lack of physicality, the lack of effort, the lack of grit. That's been my chief complaint about Hearts all season. Like they've seemed like gutless, gritless, lazy wage thieves all season, and I still hold that view. Like I don't think that one win away at Dingwall remotely begins to redeem them for that. They shouldn't be in this position in the first place. And like I said previously, they achieved this season exactly what they deserved, which is nothing. So by and large, who's the guy to come in and extend this past weekend into more long-term success? In my opinion, it's Derek McInnes. I think Liam Fox deserves a lot of credit for setting Hearts up in such a way as exploits their strengths. He picked a team that he felt he could trust to do the job, and those players that were in that team, they understood the assignment because of the simplicity of the approach. The back to basics approach worked for them. I do not know why we constantly attempt to veer from that approach, because while it can work in the right circumstances, and especially if you've got the players, it's not something that is necessary at all in this country. I genuinely feel that McInnes would provide the best chance of a continuation of that. More in the vein of what we saw from Hearts on Saturday. He's also got a fantastic track record in the SPL, and he's known as a guy that won't take no shit. And as we've mentioned, and as Alan and I have talked about extensively, like, the players have been an absolute disgrace this year. Their attitude has been pathetic. They've played teams that, like I said, are beneath them, teams they should be beaten, and comfortably, and they have not gotten the job done time and time and time and time again. It's why we're in the bottom six, when we have no business being anywhere lower than third, or at worst fourth. And a bad season for Hearts would have been a fourth place finished this year, in my view. They've completely fucked it. But we don't need to keep going into that, because we have talked about it a lot on the show, and there's nothing we can really do about it at the moment. The transfer window is closed. We do not have a permanent manager. And we're in the bottom six. The split has already happened, so it is what it is. McInnes will also come in with a plan. He'll come in with a plan, and he will make sure that they make every effort to fulfil that plan and bring it to fruition. He won't be shy in kicking them up the arse either. So the more I think about the Hearts managerial vacancy, the more attractive I find the proposition of McInnes. If we can get him, we should go and get him. I should say, though, that I don't expect we'll install a permanent manager until season's end. I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be announced in the coming days or even weeks. I think it will be something that we will wait until summer to do. I think Fox is going to be in charge for these last few games. I do not believe, though, that there's any chance he ends up with a job permanently, for what it's worth. I think the board will want to, and I've discussed this with Alan actually, and he mentioned it himself last week on the show. This next hire for the role, they need to get it right, and so they're going to need to make a bit of a statement appointment. This also, though, to come back to what I was saying, and one of the reasons that I think McInnes would be my favoured candidate, they also need to. This also encompasses, I think, and I know some in the support won't want to hear this, but it encompasses avoiding left field options like more obscure managers from overseas. We need a manager that knows the league and has got a proven track record of success in Scotland. And again, Derek McInnes fits that description. Another perhaps dark horse style name that's been mentioned in the media as a favourite this past week is John McGlynn. Now, John McGlynn, I have to be honest with you, and I know that, again, this will be something that a lot of people will bristle at. I would not be upset in the least if we brought John McGlynn back to the football club. His first run in charge at Tynecastle was under very difficult circumstances with an exceptionally young team, with administration basically in the background waiting to happen any time. He's shown that he has the ability as a manager to be a success if he's given the right resources, and with Hearts resources now as compared to his previous run, I would be more than happy to have John McGlynn come in. He wouldn't be my first choice, don't get me wrong, but I just personally would be more comfortable with a known quantity like John McGlynn than a left field style kind of exotic manager from overseas who plays sexy possession based football, or some sort of press that we've never heard of. I think that we need to make the right choice, which in this occasion isn't necessarily a marquee name. It's someone who is able to organise the team and have them play more committed football, and just get the ball forward and get the ball in the back of the net, because that is what wins football matches. And we have the talent to do that. We've shown that we have the talent to do that in small bursts, frustratingly small bursts. But we just need someone who can get that out of the players, and that level of effort out of the players on a consistent basis. For me, like I say, it would be Derek McInnes would be my favourite option there, if he has an option at all. The other news, obviously, that came out now, since it's now Wednesday morning as I'm recording this, because I watched the game. I actually only watched the game last night on Tuesday, very late on, because I hadn't watched the full game. And then Alan obviously asked me if it would be something that I would be comfortable doing, try to do a solo episode. And I must admit, I have another newfound appreciation for Alan's work on the podcast, because it is extremely difficult to do one of these shows alone. It's even in my other podcasting work with whether it be baseball or music related, I've never done it on my own. I've always had at least a guest to bounce off of, and my podcasting style, as it were, is very reactive. I don't script shows. I ask basic beginning, middle, and end questions, and then react, and that's where the rest of my questions come from. So I'm very used to a certain way of doing things. This is the complete opposite. I'm sitting in my living room with Michael Stipe, and talking to myself at the moment. I'm just glad, quite frankly, that I'm home alone, so I don't sound like too much of a lunatic to the family, like any more of a lunatic than I usually do, at very least. So anyway, the other big news was that yesterday saw the long expected and eagerly anticipated official announcement that English businessman Tony Bloom, whose involvement in the ownership of USG in Belgium and as chairman of Brighton, more notably, has coincided with drastic upturns in both clubs' fortunes and in profile. And Tony Bloom has made a proposal to purchase a minority stake in Hearts, for which he intends to pay just under £10 million. The exact figure reported is 9.86 million, and that'll be worth 29% of shares, non-voting shares, as I understand it. Following, I read a great article on Heart Standard, which I definitely recommend. The deal that saw Hearts adopt Jamestown Analytics was largely facilitated by the goodwill that developed between Bloom and the Jambos hierarchy as far back as a year ago, and with Jamestown fixing to play a major role in recruitment across all departments of the club moving forward for years to come, Bloom's involvement with Hearts and the financial benefits it brings looks set to factor into that role in a tangible way. I'm excited, as I know a massive proportion of the sport is, and if this is approved, it could be a game-changing investment in the club, I think. The offer is now subject to a consultation period due to last next 3 weeks, and a Foundation of Hearts vote on whether to grant assent to Bloom's entering the fold. Like I said, Hearts Standard put together some excellent journalism, no surprise there, on their website detailing the ins and outs of the Bloom proposal, so do check that out if you haven't already. I really strongly recommend that. Exciting times. Let us know again in the comments, what are your thoughts on Tony Bloom's proposal? Where do you think his involvement in that financial boost could take Hearts next season? It's going to be a massive summer. Like Alan was pointing out to me in our WhatsApp chat earlier this week, it is a huge summer for Hearts. We need to get recruitment spot on because we've done so badly in the last couple of years. This really, in a lot of ways, will be Graham Jones's opportunity to really put his stamp on the club. He is going to be very heavily involved in the footballing department and especially recruitment moving forward. He has the tool of Jamestown to use at his disposal. He needs to get it right. It's kind of a baptism of fire for poor Graham Jones. I feel that Savage, much like Alan, to be fair, anyone who has watched the show regularly in the last year or any time that I've been on previously will not be remotely surprised to learn that I'm in complete agreement with Alan regarding Joe Savage. I feel that he doesn't get anywhere near the blame that he deserves for the recruitment failures and the ways that the footballing department has lacked in the recent years. It's a shame, really, that it's Mrs. Budge that's being verbally abused by fans at games instead of Savage. To get back to just touch on that very briefly, and then I'll kind of move towards the end of the show. Anne Budge and the board have done everything that we've asked them to. You could maybe accuse them of being a bit too loyal at times, but they have pulled the trigger eventually. They identified a need to improve the footballing department because Savage wasn't doing the job. They went out, they got Shelley Kerr, and they brought in Graham Jones as the new sporting director. These two haven't had, in the structure they have around them, they haven't had much of an opportunity to conduct the surgery that's needed on this club. The January window was never going to be a period of time where they were going to have the time, the resources, to or the data needed to make those changes that need to be made. This summer is going to be the time for that, and it is very crucial, like I say, that they get that right. So anyway, yeah, we move on, as Alan would say. This coming weekend, we have a match at Tynecastle this Saturday against Motherwell with a 3 p.m. kickoff. Michael Vimmer's side will be in good spirits after they overturned a deficit to beat Dundee 2-1 at Dens Park by way of an injury time winner by super sub Tamanda Mazwanise, despite having been reduced to 10 men earlier in the game. So Motherwell are not going to be an easy proposition at all. They've beaten us this year already. I believe it was, I think it was at Tynecastle. I'm fairly sure it was at Tynecastle. Let me just quickly check that. Hearts FC versus Motherwell. Head to head. While I'm doing this, pop a comment below with your thoughts on this past weekend, and what you think of the managerial search. Who would be your preferred candidate? Yep, Motherwell defeated Hearts. It was on 25th of August by 3-1. Anyway. Yeah. It's not easy to do this by yourself, apparently. It's not going to be an easy game. I do think that following Saturday, and Liam Fox has been confirmed as taking charge of this coming game as well. I'm assuming he'll stick with mostly more of the same following Saturday's convincing result. I do suspect that Devlin might be reintroduced to starting 11, assuming that he's fully recovered from the illness that prevented him from featuring up in Dingwall. I'm going to be optimistic. I think Hearts are going to take that one. I'll predict a 2-1 win. I'm going to say Shankland and Vargas to score for Hearts in a 2-1 win. Do let us know in the comments how you think we'll set up. And if you're feeling brave, drop a score prediction, and let's see who comes closest. I am missing my boys Alan and Ewan dreadfully right now. It has been a task to record this solo episode. I won't lie. I was dreading it. I was very anxious before I hit record. I'll be completely honest with you. But we have come to the end of the show. I hope that it has not been too much of a disaster. I do have a tendency to ramble even when I'm on with Alan and I've got him there to to direct traffic and reel me in. I do still tend to go on and on and on. But with that being said, we have come to the end of the show. Do check us out on our socials. You'll find them listed below if you're watching the YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're watching on and you're listening on Spotify, do search Since I Was Young podcast on Facebook, Blue Sky, X/Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And yeah, enjoy the game this weekend, folks. We will be back in some form next week. I'm hoping that Ewan and Alan will be able to do the show. Obviously, this is their show. I just want to close by once again reiterating how grateful I am to have been invited on the show so many times this year. When Alan has needed to sort of throw something together due to lack of availability for Ewan, because he's had lots of other commitments going on with his work and stuff over the course of this past season. He hasn't hesitated to give me the shout, and that's so gratifying. And it's been really great to be part of the show this year. So hopefully, I'll get to come back again, but in a less stressful and pressure cooker situation with Alan at least, or preferably both Alan and Ewan also involved. So yeah, drop a like, subscribe to the podcast. We just got past 500. Thanks again for that. Now on to 600. If you haven't already subscribed, then do so, please. We would really appreciate it. Drop a comment with your general thoughts on the show this week. Anything you might think we might want to cover over the coming weeks as we wind down the 2024-25 season. What your thoughts were on Saturday, your thoughts on Bloom, your thoughts on this coming Saturday's game. I think I've just realised that I didn't finish don't think I fully finished my point on Bloom. It's worth noting that no, I did. I did. I'm going to go to bed because I have had very little sleep. I stayed up most of the night trying to prepare an episode, and then I crashed out and fell asleep, and then I've woken up. And I've thrown this out there. So it's yours now. You can have it. I hope you've enjoyed it. If not, don't worry. Normal service will be resuming soon. Alan and Ewan will be back in some form for next week's episode. I might join one or both of them if needed, but Alan knows to just give me a shout if that's the case. Hopefully I will never have to do this again. it's just terrifying. It really is. It's an odd experience having to talk to yourself about Hearts for an hour with no one to bounce off. Yeah, we'll call it there. Thanks so very much for joining us on Since I Was Young this week, and on the Hearts. Bye.